Welcome to the April Fire Chief's video message. Sun's shining, warm weather's upon us, and as we break into spring and hopefully get through the cold months of March and the dreariness that we just passed through, we'll be out and about training. We'll be out and about doing area familiarization, drivers, training activities, pumper training, skill and development. All of that revolves around apparatus. I mentioned last month that I was looking to have somebody from CMF here. And sitting next to me is Steve Neubauer, Pumper Division Crew Chief. Steve, welcome. I actually usually ask my guests how you got here. So to be honest, I roped you into being here. I asked for somebody from CMF to be there, and I thought you were interested, and then I got you to be here today, so I truly do appreciate you coming. So welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
So my goal with CMF, or my goal with having a member from CMF here, was to have somebody from the mechanic and crew chief group sitting here talking to the members of the department about what CMF does, and to give your perspective on the activities at the garage. So we've talked about a few things, and I got two questions for you. You got two questions for me. One of my first questions would be, what factors go into, I'm going to use engine PMs because you're in the pumper division, but what factors go into taking a couple months, 2 months or 3 months for a unit when it leaves the station to go to CMF for its DOT or its PM, that it takes 3 months for all that to occur? What goes into that time?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked it because it can kind of be reconfigured to what do we do at CMF? And
Right.
The answer doesn't just pertain to pumpers. The answer is pretty much the same for other divisions, the aerials and the EMS units. There's four main factors that go into why does it take so long. The complexity of the equipment, the large number of defects, the age and usage of the vehicles, and the need to send vehicles outside CMF to vendors. So to explain those, four, the complexity of the equipment. Our PM task list has 120 items on it. That sounds like a pretty long list.
For all vehicles or just for the engines?
For pumpers.
Okay.
The EMS are a little bit shorter. The aerials are about the same, although they don't have the same things
No
on
pumps,
them.
but ladders and
Right.
hydraulics.
So 120 items sounds long, and it is, but when you look at some of those items, for instance, one item says check the door latches, the door alarm sensors, the door locks, and the hinges. So on our frontline pumpers, there's 29 doors. So if they're touching 3 things on every door, that's almost 60 items just to cross one item off of the checklist, and that if they find problems, that then generates a repair. So the list is already starting to grow. So why is our PM task list 120 items? That's not just something we sit around and make up. That PM task list is basically manufacturers' recommended things for the diesel engine or for the retarder. It's also basic operational and safety checks, like do the doors all latch properly, and some of the NFPA recommendations. Tires, for example, we have to check the age on every tire. So,
in addition to depth, you're actually checking the age date or on the tire itself.
Correct. So there's 2 different governing bodies in checking tires: the DOT requirement and then NFPA for age. So those are pretty easy checks.
Okay.
Those are pretty quick, but they're still on the list. Our list is long, but it's comprehensive. Okay. So there's a lot of work to do just to get through a PM checklist. So it's complex equipment, and we have to do it all. We don't like to cut any corners. That's what's the first factor. The second factor, the number of defects. We clear defects throughout the year when we can, if we can bring it up for a quick fix, or if something breaks and takes something out of service, we clear some defects throughout the year. But when we pull the vehicle in for its annual preventive maintenance and DOT inspection, there's usually anywhere between 45 and 60 defects that are still open that still needed to be fixed. So they've been as high as 70, but that's kind of the worst case scenario. So having to add 60 more items to the list of things that need to be repaired, that's certainly going to
And that may be a compartment light, a ripped seat. What are you saying are defects like that?
Those things that weren't things that they had to come out of service for the year. So it may be that a valve doesn't work electrically but works manually.
Okay.
It may be a torn seat cushion. It may be the hose bed flap.
Okay.
It
Not out of service criteria, a performance impact element, but not a safety issue.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. We hopefully send the vehicle back with 0 open defects. Occasionally, there may be 1 or 2. If it was a scratch on a compartment, we're not going to send that vehicle out to a body shop at that point. But we try to clear them all.
Okay.
The third factor, the vendor usage, the need to go out to vendor. Why do we send vehicles out to vendors? 2 different reasons. One is we don't have enough staffing to do all the PMs and DOTs in-house, so we send them out to the vendors that are capable of doing that kind of work. We kind of use them as an extension of ourselves.
Right.
The other reason we would use a vendor is if it's specialty equipment or the vendor's really good at what they do. So diesel engines are a great example. We do the preventive maintenance on the diesel engines, but if there's capital repairs, it makes more sense to send that out to the engine vendor, because if we forget to order one little part, we can't finish the job. Now that vehicle's stuck in that bay for 2 or 3 days while we get the part. So from an efficiency standpoint, it makes sense. Send that work to the specialists, let them do it. We've certainly got plenty more in our queue that we could be doing.
Right.
And it just makes sense from that point of view.
And you talked about springs as one of those examples, engines or...
Yeah. Our suspension vendor is a perfect example of why we would want to send it out. They stock everything. They're much better and quicker at it than we are, because that's all that they do. They give us great service.
It's usually a same-day service on a traditional spring job.
Yeah, they take very good care of us. Our suspension vendor is probably our best vendor. So we will shift that out. If I have my choice between working on a fire pump or working on springs, if I've got somebody that can do springs, they can do it. I don't have a bunch of vendors that can do pumps. So everything that we do when we send something out to a vendor is efficiency, with efficiency in mind.
Okay.
So the last thing is age and usage. As the equipment gets older, the number of defects and repairs is going to go up. It has to. A perfect example of that is engine 706. In 2013, we pulled it in for its annual PM, DOT, and defect resolution, our big project, and we had 82 hours in it. 3 years later, this year, we've got 230 hours in it, and we're not done yet. It's actually sitting at the engine vendor. It's had to go back there for a third recheck, which is the downfall of using vendors.
And you use the word recheck. That's also quality control, because every vendor service is then inspected for quality upon return.
That's true. That's a good point. We do quality control on everything. It's easier to stay in front of that if the vehicle's still in front of us in our building.
Right.
If we see something that's not quite right, we can head it off at the pass, so to speak. But when it's in the control of a vendor, we get it back and we have to inspect the entire vehicle. And with the scope of some of this stuff, there's usually some things that aren't quite right. So in the case of engine 706, it's gone back to the engine vendor multiple times. And when they're done with it, that vehicle's got enough age on it that the kingpins are worn. So it's going to go out to yet another vendor.
Right.
We don't have the special tools to do kingpins in-house anyway. So it's there's no option B. The vehicle's been out of service for a long time, but that's the way it's going to go. But the big point is that in 3 years, we've tripled the amount of time that's been needed to
Right.
get that vehicle back to a presentable condition. That's not going to go away. So when you add up complexity, the number of defects, the need to send it out to a vendor, and the age and the usage, you wind up with 3 months.
Right, and we had that large inrush of apparatus in the 2007, 2009 timeframe. We didn't effectively buy any heavy apparatus until within the last 12 months.
Right.
We had the last 3 engines that were purchased in 2015, and now we're starting to kick that engine process along with a multi-year contract looking like 6 or so units a year for a 4 to 5 year cycle. So we're going to be another 5 years before some of those 07, 08 Crimsons are replaced with the next frontline unit. And those rigs will be 12 and 13 years frontline, which is beyond our scope of desired.
Absolutely. We just are seeing some of those frontline pumpers crack the 100,000 mile mark, and that's a pretty big deal.
Right.
And taking a 47,000 pound vehicle and using it to run a lot of EMS calls, puts lots of miles on the clock, wears out a lot of things, and takes its toll in dollars and time.
Right. So you used engine 706, and that was actually a pretty good example because one of the times, a couple months back, I know you, I believe Chief Doyle, worked on a project for Chief Jones at my request about the number of defects, and that same report out was 60 plus or minus defects on going into an engine PM process equates to about 0, on the outbound side of that. One of the things you didn't specifically say that our stations have been experiencing is that warranty work or recall work or body work. We're still working through some activities that are being supported by the manufacturer as warranty activities. And the body remounts and even some of the paint repainting activities that are now on the trailing side. Those units all went out predominantly, and some went out a good distance.
Absolutely.
And length of where they went to have that warranty work done. And we're getting good support by those vendors and the manufacturers on the vehicles, but that does add to that time the vehicle's out.
It certainly affects the fleet and the number of trucks that are available. We weren't running those things concurrently or as part of the PM.
Right.
That was its own schedule as they were able to, as rapidly as they were able to do those, we were doing what we needed to do to keep that part going, but wasn't actively a part of a PM.
Right. It's another factor for sure.
Absolutely.
So anything else to add on what goes into that length of time?
You brought up warranty. When the vehicles are under warranty, certainly we don't want to take it out of our budget or the taxpayer's pocket to pay for repairs. So our hands are tied to a point. We'll send it back to the manufacturer and have things fixed so that we're not paying for it.
Okay.
We occasionally will, if it's one small item, we'll eat the cost just to keep the truck on the street.
Right.
But when it's under warranty, it's definitely a different rule that we.
And there's an importance to that because just like
Yeah.
you would do with your car,
Absolutely.
you're taking it back to the dealership for that issue. You're not taking it to the local mom and pop auto repair because you're expecting the dealership to take care of it. And that's how they
Sure.
want to do it. They want to do it in their processes. Mm-hmm. So change has been occurring at CMF. Mm-hmm. Through the budget process in fiscal year 16, we got an additional crew chief, additional parts technician, 3 additional mechanics, and the M3 or the fleet manager position. As you see those changes occurring with those additional positions, what do you see changing at CMF, or what has changed that you can pass on?
So to answer that question, you have to understand where we are. right now. So we've created 4 new workspaces so that as we bring new folks on, they can come up to speed right away. We've purchased new lifts and invested in the infrastructure of the building so that when we get those technicians, we've got some place for them to work. And as soon as they are ready and able, we're ready to go for that. Those are the tangible things. Those are the things that you can physically see.
Right.
But the bigger question is what change is there going to be to performance? Right. Everybody wants to know, how are we going to get more performance at a CMF? The reality is we have 4 open technician positions, 2 that are older positions that were vacated, and 2 new ones that we've created. We've got a crew chief position that was vacated due to Dave Atwood's retirement. Those positions are all we need to fill those positions. We have 3 more guys that we think are going to be retiring relatively soon. So we're interviewing additional personnel, but we may not stay up to full staff very long. So if we fill all the technician positions that we have, we'll be at 11. That will allow us to get closer to where we need to be. That'll allow us to do more PMs, address more defects, and make more repairs to the vehicles. But we'll still be 5 technicians short of what we need to do preventive maintenance, general repairs to a fleet this size.
Right, a little over 200 rigs, EMS and greater.
Right. So what does all that mean? That means that if we fill all our open positions, we still will not be able to do everything at CMF. We'll still need to send preventive maintenance, DOT, and general repair work out to vendors. So is it going to help? Absolutely. But we will see a benefit from it. We'll see a performance increase for the better, but we're not going to get to the point where we're going to be able to do everything in-house.
Now, we're going to see extended hours at a period of time once we get some of those positions filled. Just give a little bit of what those hours are planned to be for the folks.
Well, without being the final authority on that, I believe we're talking somewhere around noon to 8 p.m.
Right.
So why are we thinking that's what's going to happen? We wanted some overlap between the day side and the night side, so that things that may come up in the morning that need to be handled, if
continuity and carryover.
Yeah, if we haven't been able to fully resolve them, the second shift folks are coming on and they can pick up if they need to.
Right.
So that was why we wanted the overlap.
So that is down the road, once those positions get filled, those people get capable or get checked off as techs, and there's no doubt that that'll expand some of our capabilities at CMF. But as you said, you and I have worked on some number crunching, as we would call it, and industry standards or benchmarks as to how many trucks, how much you want to work, how many hours, or what factor there is per the complexity of the vehicle. Thus equates to how many mechanics. And those numbers help lead us to the additional positions we got this year. And, you know, I don't want to use the word grand plan, but there is a plan to progress forward with some additional changes like that to work towards bringing up that tech count. So incremental, but as I've said here before, I say it again, if anybody in our organization knows somebody who's a truck mechanic, wants to be in the truck mechanic industry, has that training, have them apply, have them come by CMF, and good place to work, good capabilities, benefits, and the support from the organization is there. Looking for all good takers.
Absolutely. We've picked up a couple good folks along the way, but it's kind of hard to find good heavy truck mechanics in Montgomery County.
Yeah.
Most of our folks come from a long way away to work here.
No doubt. So those were my two questions to talk about CMF from the perspective of a CMF, member. What were the topics that you wanted to throw my way?
So the first one is born from the fact that we do have pumpers that are over 100,000 miles, and we know we're not getting rid of them anytime soon. So my first question was, what would be necessary in order to keep from using heavy apparatus to run EMS calls?
And we were talking offline as we were working through some issues here. We were expanding a little bit more about some of that. As I say, it's a holistic approach to EMS calls, and we're tackling it in different facets all concurrently, a lot of which are behind the scenes and people don't see. Some of our providers in the street do see. And as I highlighted a few of them to you in preparation for the meeting, there were things you weren't, common knowledge. Part of it is our goal to disconnect the paramedic from the cot. That doesn't directly result in a less heavy apparatus running the call, but as we can add chase cars in our higher density areas, so we have a paramedic in an SUV on that ALS 1 call, and we run about 32,000 of those a year. On that ALS 1 call, we can send the transport unit and the chase car and not even send the heavy apparatus to provide the paramedic. And we're looking at about 8 places along that 355 corridor, the George Avenue corridor, where we'll have a chase car. And we did that test back in the middle of 14. And with the proposals in the FY17 budget, we look like we're moving into that implementation in the 2nd Battalion during FY17 and then hopefully beyond. So that's one process. Again, getting the medic off the transport unit, putting them into chase cars in our higher density area, we'll run that SUV on those low acuity ALS calls and not the paramedic engine. At the same time, I say that I do want all remaining 6 engines to have a paramedic. I want to have a paramedic at every station to start the day to provide a service for both our personnel as well as the citizen across the street. That 32,000 times a year that we go out for that low acuity ALS call, only about 40% of those patients, or only about 19,000 of those, about 13,000 of those people need to be transported with a paramedic. Get to the scene, assess the patient, determine the patient's an appropriate BLS transport that patient with the BLS unit. That paramedic's back on that unit, back on that chase car or back on that fire truck and available for the next call. And we've seen the value in that ability to have the medic disconnected from the cot, and we're going to progress towards that. So that's one way of reducing heavy apparatus response. When we did the chase car test at station 8, 25, and 3, the folks on the tower or trucks as appropriate, they were amazed the overnight change in the volume of calls those special services were running EMS-wise when the chase car was in service. They got cut by significant values, almost in half the number of daily calls. And that's absolutely the goal. Prevent those special services from running as many EMS events. So that's part of it. The next step, it's a step that's way behind the scenes, it's at ECC, is implementing a screening or protocol criteria where there's actually a nurse at ECC who talks to the patient before it's a patient, actually talks to the caller and is able to tell the caller to maybe take aspirin or take over-the-counter medications and then call us back in 2 hours. We can actually reduce the number of events that we transport and dispatch by implementing what's called Emergency Communications Nursing System, ECNS. That's another way that's in the out years for us to be able to reduce the number of dispatched events by screening them even more complex and more detailed screening at the 911 center. On the far end of that spectrum, right now, folks from the EMS section on a daily basis, or actually more specifically on a monthly basis, are working with Health and Human Services. They're working with the other county partner agencies to utilize the support of the county infrastructure, county services, to help our quality customers or the folks that call 911 a lot, that demand our services a lot. And every month they talk about the frequent utilizers of our service. They identify the fact that this patient, this citizen may be waitlisted for a different Health and Human Service program. And when they get them moved up and get them enrolled in that program, they get more services. They maybe get a in-care home aide, 2 days a week or 2 hours a day up from what they didn't have. We see that call volume for that patient goes down. So EMS sections working with other parts in HHS, as an example, to improve the interactions between county government to reduce the calls for 911 service. Next month, I'm going to have Rob Tobin here, and he's going to talk about how that works at the skilled nursing facilities as well, how we work on interacting with those facilities so that we're not taking a 911 call for a patient that is more appropriately transported by a private ambulance service or routine transport to a medical facility or a doctor's office, but had been in the past resulted in a 911 dispatch. So a lot of different things go into that factor, but on a year-to-year trend basis, we're about 4% rise in total call volume, 116,000 this year and about 112,000 last year. As I said, that's 70,000 people that went to the hospital, and that number is going to go up. Everything we do is going to abate that number a little bit, take that 4% and maybe make it a total result of maybe a 2% gain. But a lot of things are going into the works to, as you say, run less heavy apparatus on the calls. As the population grows and as I would describe it as the health of our home citizens gets more complicated. People who used to be in medical facilities 5 and 10 years ago dealing with their medical conditions are now at home because of home health care activities and the advancements in healthcare. That does also relate to more calls, because when something goes wrong with that complex patient who's at home, how are they dealt with? They have to result in being transported to the hospital. So a lot of different factors, and we're working, people have heard us talk, we're progressing forward working with the state about this alternative destination program where we can take patients to medical clinics or urgent cares. That's one way of getting things turned around quicker. At the same time, community paramedicine, as people have phrased it, is another way by which we could eliminate the 911 call or work on keeping the patients healthier at home. A lot of stuff, and anybody who's got a good idea, let me go backwards. Anybody who's got an idea, it may be a great idea. People may think it's not worth of passing it on. Pass it on. Call your EMS supervisor. Talk to that person. Understand that may already be in place. Throw your idea out to the EMS supervisor or somebody in the EMS section as an example. And it may end up that idea is something that hadn't been thought about or hadn't been looked at in that variation, and something we were able to implement and make a change. So everybody should push their ideas up. So a lot of stuff, a lot of patience, and that's what we're here for.
Complex problems for sure.
Yep.
That second part's interesting. I had never crossed my mind as the greasy shirt guy. The things I'm aware of are more the chase vehicle type stuff. So I had no idea there were things going on,
right,
other than anything like that to try to lower the number of calls to begin with.
Like I said, a lot of stuff, both pre-call, post-call, and ways to make the calls go quicker.
Sure.
All occurring at the same time. A few hurdles to get things like that done, but all that's being worked progressively and with high motivation by staff. Great question.
Thanks. The second question is more directly apparatus, because That's my wheelhouse. That's what I made my career out of. If a particular type or feature on a piece of equipment is known to have a history of durability issues, and there are other options out there that would function nearly as well, cost less, and have a better service life, why would we collectively go against the technical advice of the experts and opt to choose a more costly, less durable piece of equipment?
That was almost like a test question.
Yeah, it was.
Worded so that it was structured and as such, and I honestly didn't phrase that question. You came up with the question. That's really drilling in on the towers. The All-Steer says one example thereof. Another example may be something in your division.
All-Steers was at the top of my list, but there are things in every breed that you could apply that question, which is why I kind of tried to keep it generic.
Nope. And I'm going to answer more towards the All-Steer component, but I definitely wanted to bring it into light that people would think about. All-Steers and TDAs, that 60-40 split, that overarching, goal to have close to even percentages of both interspersed. The TDAs are really dealing with two factors. They're dealing with the aerial capability and the truck company services, but also dealing with that rescue truck functionality. Those TDAs, where they're located, do fill an important role in filling the gap of extrication services. And when we started those TDAs in the 2005 timeframe, we really saw a great improvement in our response time and our abilities for extrication. So the TDA does address that in two roles. It's an aerial that's also, part rescue squad. The All-Steer, we deal with that version 1, we would call it old Tower 6, the one that's currently at 23 as its primary use. That was definitely the first generation All-Steer that was, Pierce, Oshkosh, the variation of that component. There was a lot of learns from that. There's definitely a benefit for the All-Steer, which I'll hit in a little bit, but a lot of change occurred from that version All-Steer to the second version, and there's about 5 of those out there, and that one became a combination electric mechanical, and I would say, sitting here, they were prone to failures, and we've had issues where those things had component electric switches, feature failures. David was the crew chief for the aerial group until his retirement, and there's a very complex system of maintenance that can only be done by the vendor for the certification on that does go into the All-Steer. And now we're rolling into 2 of the new All-Steers on order, or All-Steer Model 3. And that's actually gone almost all mechanical now, as I've been learned about it. And folks who've done the test drive on that like it. There's a little bit of a variation on how it does operate, but it's less electrical. And I'm not going to be an electrical engineer, and I believe a lot of our folks understand the complexity of the electrical parts of our apparatus, and a lot of our nuisance issues may be from electrical problems, and I feel that with an adjustment from Model 1 or All-Steer 1 to All-Steer 3, going away from electrical components and going to a predominantly mechanical system, we may be able to overcome part of those troubles. One of the things that you highlighted, Steve, was why do we need that? And I used the phrase, when you need it, you need it. People ask the same question. We were looking at the back of the new TDA yesterday. Why are we carrying a 45-foot Bangor ladder on the ladder truck? We almost never throw it. And we don't even staff the unit with enough people to actively, with a 3-person or even a 4-person ladder truck, you can't practically raise that ladder with only 3 or 4 people. why do we even carry it? And the answer is, when you need it on the fire ground. And when you have to make that 5th floor rescue on the back of an apartment building where you can't get the aerial to, you need that 45-foot ladder. So we do carry some equipment that we do carry, we do use, we do have in our fleet, because when you need it, you need it. Been a person who's witnessed what an all-steer can do. You know, an all-steer driver can put an all-steer in a place even a TDA can't fit. And that crab mode, the fireground mode, that's definitely a functionality that we benefit from by having as a tool in our toolbox. One of the things that does benefit us in general is that we're keeping with the same manufacturer that works towards training. We were talking to the driver's training folk this morning before we came upstairs, and having that consistency between, you know, what we would call Tower 6 and the next, you know, the 2 next all steers coming in, does benefit from the ability of both mechanically as well as driver's training for unit operation. Since that 07-09 time frame, with the purchase of the all steers and the TDAs, and now the follow-on 3 TDAs, our apparatus have been very consistent in size, structure, and layout, and that too has a benefit for our capabilities of apparatus. And trying to go backwards, I believe this week the truck committee is rolling up to Spartan to do a midpoint on the 2nd truck, and we talked here before a couple months back about what the committee membership is and the process, and there was guidance set from the fire chief's office about, you know, we wanted to have the TDAs have similar capabilities, but we let the groups make their recommendations on design and the engineering of things and what the capabilities were. We let the group do a test drive of one of the Model 3 all steers, or the all mechanical all steers. And there was a gentleman at 19, Jim Slosher, who's the all steer guy for the IAFF. And there's definite value in what the committee says, and we do definitely take that influence into the decisions. And both myself and other senior managers look at it and say, we still need that all-steer capability. We still need that. It's the best way to get a large vehicle of that size versus a straight chassis and a straight truck into activities and places. And hopefully that Model 3 change over Model 2, or, you know, all mechanical versus electric and mechanical combined, will be an improvement. There's other examples in the industry that help us that way, and it's something that's balanced. So, as the guy from the engine committee, I know you got a couple things in the engine pumper division that, you know, may fit in this type of category too.
They do.
And for Ernie now, or David beforehand, the all steers are something that, as we've integrated them into our service, we've definitely benefited from their operational capability. So, great question, and I hope I, you know, provided the why we do, you know, combine those two together.
You did. You gave the answer that I figured that you would give, that when you need it, you need it.
Right. So, and as I understand, the new 2 all steers are also going to come in with Bangor ladder. So, I asked a question. So we're keeping this and keeping that, and we're adding a 45, and the answer was yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay, great.
I believe you lost the crab feature.
I understand that's part of it. Yeah.
And I was out at Pierce inspecting some pumpers. I've seen where the steering boxes are on the back of the new breed, and it's not going to be. You don't want to be a greasy shirt guy when they start leaking. You want to be far away from it. But when the answer is, when you need it,
you need it. Yep. So, you have any other questions for me?
No.
What's the next thing you see in the engine group? We were talking a little bit beforehand about, you know, we're getting ready to design a spec for the new engine. What do you see coming out as the maybe a next improvement in the engine spec for the next 20 some engines?
Nothing huge. There are small changes that no matter what manufacturer we go with, will help on my side
Okay.
of the fence. I told you earlier, my opinion is that I think anybody that builds a big aluminum box is going to have problems with the size of our current pumper. I think aluminum is not the way to go. Some of the manufacturers are starting to make truly engineered stainless steel bodies that are getting closer, or very close to the same weight. And using aluminum has been the choice because
Provide payload.
It affects the payload, right? So if you can make a stainless steel body that's close in weight, it would seem to have a lot of benefits.
Right.
So,
and as we've said, we're making a performance spec that's going to go out for bid and go out for all manufacturers to look at. And then we'll evaluate all the respondents to that. It could be any apparatus out there. And we're still about 6 months away from something in that nature being, bid and responded to. So as we move out to FDIC next week and look at what's new, shall we say, in industry, it's something that's definitely on the radar of the folks in apparatus.
And I'm not sure that the stainless is going to be incorporated into this spec because I don't know if we beat that timeline.
Okay.
If you're asking me what in the industry do I like, that's what I like that's out there now.
Okay.
I'm not so sure we've made the time cutoff to have that this time around.
Cool. Well, thank you for that. That was definitely unscripted, and I asked you, because we hit it beforehand. So, Steve, thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
When you get back to CMF, my appreciation to everybody there, as you call them, the greasy shirts. Definitely appreciate the effort that they do, and more specifically, the focus they have. Your focus, their focus is on safe and working apparatus. And when a vehicle leaves there, that's what it is. So I appreciate that greatly.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you much.
It's a good group of guys we got.
Nope, no doubt. So as we roll into the end of this month's video, as I mentioned a moment ago, we got Rob Tobin coming in next month to talk about skilled nursing and the services that he does and the interactions with the facilities. We mentioned it's already April, weather's breaking, it's going to be nice, it's going to be definitely time to get out there and train. Enjoy the warm weather and take care, be safe.